There's a choice about who can better manage our economy, and of course the question that Australians need to ask is, are you better off today, is our country better off today than 3 years ago? Generations of Australians have built their lives and our country on the belief that if you work hard you can get ahead and build a better future for your children. However, right now Australia is going backwards. The Prime Minister spent the first half of this term of Parliament obsessed with the voice, and it meant that he didn't have a plan to deal with the scourge of inflation. Because of Labor's bad decisions, Australians are doing it tough and they need help. Worse still, for many, they're losing hope for their future. 29,000 small businesses have gone broke over the course of the Albanese government's first term. I don't believe that we can simply afford to continue down the current path, and that means that we can't afford 3 more years of Labor. Labor's economic policies and wasteful spending have increased the cost of living for everyday Australians. Australians are now paying on average 18% more for rent, 30% more for groceries, and over 30% more for power and gas. Under Labor, Australia's had the biggest fall in living standards in the developed world, and Australia has just recorded the highest annual number of small business bankruptcies, as I say, on record. Too many young Australians feel that the dream of home ownership is completely beyond them. And what sort of Prime Minister in the middle of a cost of living crisis promises a 70-cent a day tax cut starting in 15 months' time? Australian families need relief now, and we must do better, and there is a better way, and the Coalition has an achievable plan to get our country back on track. That's why a Coalition government will cut fuel excise by 25 cents a litre, so that every time you fill up your car or your ute at the Bowser, it's about $14 cheaper. Our plan will help get our country back on track. A government I lead will build a strong economy with low inflation, and we will deliver this by reining in the wasteful spending that fuels inflation. We will reduce tax, red tape, and we will take control again of building sites and take them away from the CFMEU and the organised crime groups. We want to make sure that we can make building sites safe again, that we can make construction affordable again in our country. We'll deliver cheaper energy to families and small businesses. I think this is a really important point, and one of the big points of difference between what Labor will offer at this election and what the Coalition will offer to the Australian people. This includes, as you know, by immediately delivering more Australian gas for Australians. It will lower energy costs and it will prepare us for the future, as we need cheaper energy, we need reliable energy, and we need cleaner energy. We will make housing more affordable by reducing Labor's record migration intake, by funding critical infrastructure, assisting first home buyers, and restricting foreign investors. By making housing more affordable, we'll restore the hope of home ownership for young Australians. We'll take the necessary decisions and show the necessary resolve to keep Australians safe. We're going to boost spending for the Australian Defence Force because we live in a very uncertain time. We're going to make our suburbs and our towns safer, and we're going to make sure that we have a focus on border security once again. And we'll improve healthcare, reversing Labor's decline in bulk billing and, importantly, reversing their cuts to mental health services. I bring experience and a track record to this job. I have a track record as a police officer, as a small business owner, and as a minister across a number of portfolios. Importantly, I have a very experienced team, and with people from diverse backgrounds who have experience running small businesses, creating jobs and delivering healthcare, serving our country and their communities. Our team is united, experienced, and ready for the responsibility of governing Australia. Our plan will deliver a stronger economy with low inflation and affordable homes in safer communities. A stronger, safer, better Australia. When it comes to the economy, inflation, energy, housing and security, Labor has simply failed to deliver. And unfortunately, Mr Albanese is too weak and Labor is too incompetent to fix the problems that they've created and that are facing our country today. We can't afford 3 more years like the last 3. There is a better way for our country, and my team and I have a practical plan which will deliver cost of living relief and lower power prices into the future. I ask Australians for your vote for your Liberal and National candidates at the next election so that we can get our country back on track and to make sure that we can deal with our times, which are very uncertain. And I'm very happy to take any questions.
Mr. Dutton, the coalition has a $300 billion plan for nuclear energy, but it barely got a mention last night in your budget reply. Why is that? Are you walking back from nuclear because the electorate doesn't like it?
Well, I spoke extensively about our energy plan last night, and I think it's important to point out that our plan has gas, and a lot of gas, in the system between now and when nuclear can come online in 2035 to 37. The Prime Minister's plan of renewables rolls out over about a 15-year period. It is much more expensive than our plan, in fact $263 billion more expensive than our plan for nuclear. It's not achievable because it requires 28,000 kilometres of poles and wires to be rolled out across the country, which is not going to happen. They're relying on green hydrogen, which is not a commercial reality, and all of it under the renewables only policy adds to extra increases in costs of energy. And families are seeing that at the moment. 30% more for groceries, 34% more for gas, 32% more for electricity. That's the reality of life so far under just one term of the Albanese government. So our plan, as it is for 19 of the top 20 economies around the world, look at what the Labor Party's doing in the United Kingdom, the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States. They're embracing the latest technology, zero emissions nuclear power, because it's cheaper. It's about 1/3 the cost of what we're paying for electricity in our country, and it's reliable, and it allows us to meet our net zero by 2050 undertakings. Importantly, what we announced last night for an East Coast gas reservation means that we can get the price of electricity down, because gas is used to create and generate electricity. And under our policy, we're putting gas back into the energy system, and we're doing it for Australians because it's important that we honour our overseas export contracts, but equally it's important to make sure that we can take care of Australians first, and that's what we'll do. We lower the prices of gas as a result of that, and not just for households, but for manufacturers and for supermarkets right across the economy. And that will help with the problem of inflation that Labor's created as well.
On gas, the Australian energy producers have dismissed your gas reservation plan. They say it'll lead to an oversupply on the East Coast. Why wouldn't it?
Well, that's good, and it'll bring down prices, and that's exactly what we want to do. So I'm not here to argue for the gas companies. I'm here to argue for Australian consumers, for mums and dads, for small businesses, 29,000 of whom have gone broke under Labor's watch. Now, behind every one of those stories is mum, a dad, somebody who's lost their home, somebody who's lost their life savings. And I'm going to stand up for Australians and make the decisions that we need to make to keep our country safe and to make sure that our economy is properly managed. I was the Assistant Treasurer in the Howard government, and I want to make sure that we can get the economy back on track, because families are hurting at the moment. And yes, we'll work with the gas companies, and we have in the formulation of this policy over a matter of months. But we have a plan which will roll out certainty around supply, and we do need more supply. See, part of the problem that Labor's created is that they've stopped the supply of gas. They've stopped new projects from taking place. And, of course, you haven't tempered demand, and that's driving up prices, which is in part why gas is up by 34%. And manufacturing in our country is a joke. Like, the Prime Minister has said that it's all about made in Australia. It's not, because there's been a threefold increase in the number of manufacturing businesses that have closed over the last 2.5 years under this government. And that's a disaster, because I want to make things in Australia again, but we can only do that if we've got a secure energy system, and it's only the coalition that's offering a way forward for business and for families. Labor's just promising you higher electricity prices and now blackouts and brownouts.
Mr. Dutton, when will you reveal a genuine economic policy? You talk about income tax, deficits and debt out of control, but when is the government going to explain to voters how it will drive economic growth, productivity and fiscal accountability?
Well, Michael, I pointed out last night, and I think this is a very important point to make, energy is the economy. Everything that we see before us, the plastics, cars we drive in, the hospitals we rely on, the phones, the chargers, everything relies on energy in our system. And if energy is unaffordable and if it's unreliable, then it's a disaster for the economy. And you can't have economic growth without baseload power. Renewables in the system are great, but we can't pretend that the batteries last for any more than a few hours. And Labor can't pretend that by giving you $150, that somehow that's going to compensate you for the $1,300 power bill that you're now achieving under the Labor government. I mean, the Prime Minister promised that power bills would go down by $275 a year, and instead they've gone up by $1,300. So we have to get the energy picture right, and that's what we've promised last night. We've said to Australians that, yes, the Prime Minister is offering 70 cents a day by way of a tax cut in 15 months' time. I think the Prime Minister is completely out of touch with the pressure that Australians are under at the moment. And we're saying that we want to help now pensioners and families and small businesses right across the economy with a 25-cent reduction in fuel excise. So when you go to the Bowser and you fill up your car, fill up your ute, you're going to be paying about $14 less for every tank of fuel. And that is immediate relief now, and it provides support, and it's a very significant economic policy. We've announced our nuclear policy, which is probably the biggest energy economic policy offered by an opposition in our country's history. It will underpin energy security for the next decade, for the next century. And we have announced last night an East Coast gas reservation, which will underpin economic growth over the course of the next decade and beyond. All of that is beyond the Labor Party, and I just don't think our country can afford 3 more years of Anthony Albanese.
The impact of those energy policies in the medium term and long term, what are you doing in the here and now to drive productivity? Well,
look, if your point is that it takes time to clean up a Labor's mess, well, that's true. And it took John Howard time to clean up Labor's mess when he came in '96. We say that in our plan, and again, we've given this a lot of consideration, but our positive plan for Australia means that we can bring more gas into the system by the end of this calendar year, and that is a reality. There is gas in the system at the moment that is being exported, that is not part of the foundation contracts. That gas, which is in the system now, is going to be diverted into domestic consumption, and if we can do that, that is going to have a downward pressure on prices straight away. That is much faster than the 15 years that the Prime Minister is suggesting in relation to his renewables-only policy. And I think the Prime Minister has been found out here. He promised a $275 electricity reduction before the election 97 times. And it's comical that the Treasurer refuses even to say $275. But instead your power prices have gone up by $1,300. Well, under our plan, Australians will pay less for their energy, and that's how we'll get our economy going again. It's how we'll get our country back on track, and it's how we'll help families who are really hurting because of Labor's bad decisions.
You mentioned people that were hurting and wanting to put money in people's pockets. Why won't you support keeping Labor's tax cuts as a long-term back in people's pockets money and legislate the fuel excise, given there will be that reprieve straight away? So
we have to act responsibly, and we can't pretend that we've got limitless money. Governments only have taxpayers' money, and it needs to be spent efficiently. And at the moment, every family in Australia is cutting back on expenses. They're trying to make their budgets balance each month because interest rates have gone up 12 times under this government, and because of the reckless renewables-only policy, groceries are up by 30% under Mr Albanese as well. So we need to provide support, but to do it in a fiscally responsible way. Now, what we've done with the fuel excise is to say that we'll implement it for 12 months. We can review it at the end of that, but it costs $6 billion, and it's not built in as a structural cost in the budget. Now, for the 70 cents a day, starting in 15 months' time, that costs the budget $17 billion over 4 years, and then about $7.4 billion a year ongoing. So it's a big structural cost that's built in, and it's not going to be felt by Australians because people know that you get a much better impact under what we're offering, and that is a 25 cent a litre reduction in your petrol and diesel price. And then what we want to do is create structural change in the economy around energy. And this is why the gas reservation is so important, because the government's plan is just to see power prices keep going up. They'll keep giving you $150 until they run out of money, and that is just a system that's not sustainable, and Australians aren't silly, they realise that. Our system fixes the problem at its core, that is the energy mess that Labor's created. By bringing more gas into the system, we have downward pressure on prices, and it's across the economy. Don't forget that your power bill's gone up at home, but it's also gone up for the local IGA store, and it's gone up for every small business, every farmer, every element of food production. They're all paying more for gas and electricity under Labor, and that's why groceries are up by 30% under Mr Albanese and going to go higher. And so if we get the energy picture right, then we can provide support in the medium term and longer term. But starting from the end of this calendar year, we have the ability to bring a lot of gas into the system so that we can see that downward pressure, not just on gas, but on electricity prices as well.
You're proposing
Yes,
to
yes, ma'am.
on the plan to reduce net overseas migration.
Yes.
Does that mean you plan to introduce caps across all areas of temporary migration beyond students, such as backpackers and skilled workers?
Well, I mean, firstly, just to explain the problem that we've got. So Labor's brought in 1 million people over 2 years through the migration program, which is a record for our country. Now, all of those people need homes to live in, and that's why Australians have found it really hard to find a house, to either buy a house or rent a house under Mr Albanese. When we're out there, whether it's in here in Brisbane or whether it's Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, wherever it is, when you talk to young Australians, many of them have lost the dream of home ownership, and that's because Mr Albanese has created this housing crisis where people can't afford rents. They can't afford to buy a home, and you've got all of these people who've been brought in through the record numbers in the Big Australia policy that Mr Albanese didn't explain before the last election. You're competing against those people. So we're saying we need a managed migration program. We're going to reduce the permanent migration program by 25%, so it's at 185,000 now. It'll come down to 140,000 in year 1 and 2. That creates about 40,000 homes. Over 5 years, it'll create 100,000 homes, and that can help Australians get into homes. So migration's great for our country, but it needs to be managed. And at the same time that the government's made predictions, the predictions have been blown out within a matter of months. And the government's saying that over a 5-year period there'll now be 1.8 million people coming in. Well, it'll be over 2 million. And under the Labor Party, you're going to see a housing crisis continue. And I sincerely really want to do everything I can, if I'm given the great honour of being Prime Minister, to be the Prime Minister for home affordability and accessibility. I want to get young Australians into homes, and our $5 billion plan, which is going to create 500,000 homes, will be part of the way that we do that as well.
As well as slashing migration, you're proposing to sack 40,000 public servants, cut government programs on housing and on energy. What do you say to voters who equate your policy platform to that of Donald Trump?
Well, again, if you have a look at what's happening in the economy at the moment, it's a tight labour market. And unfortunately, as I pointed out before, because of the government's bad economic decisions, 29,000 small businesses have gone broke over the last couple of years. That's a record number, more than any time in our history. So it's a different picture as you go across the economy. But my view is that families who are working really hard at the moment, some people taking up a second job, overtime, mums returning to work earlier than what they'd planned to after having kids because they just can't afford to pay the bills under this government. That's a tough situation. And when they're paying taxes, they want to make sure the taxes are being spent efficiently. Now, the rate at which the public servants in Canberra have increased is at about 3 times the rate that it was under Mr Rudd and Ms Gillard when they were in government as Prime Ministers. It's not an efficient way of spending $7 billion a year. And as a Liberal, and particularly with a heavy influence from John Howard and Peter Costello, I want to spend taxpayers' money efficiently. And I have the greatest of respect for our public servants in Canberra, but the public servants in Canberra have been put on at record numbers to please the union in Canberra. That's the Labor model. I want to make sure that we can protect frontline services, that we can put more money back into health, and we've announced more money going into GP training, announced more money into mental health, we've announced more money into helping people who are homeless. The numbers have spiked under this government. It's been a tough 3 years for a lot of Australians, and it'll only get worse if Mr Albanese is elected, particularly if it's with the Greens. And I want to make sure that we can have an efficiently run economy, and that's exactly what we'll do. We'll run our economy more efficiently. We'll help families get their lives back on track. We'll address the cost of living pressures. We'll help Australians realise the dream of home ownership again. We'll keep our country safer, and we'll make our communities and our towns and cities safer as well. And that's what we offer at this election.
Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's trying to compare you to Donald Trump. Is that a compliment or a sledge?
I just think what you'll see from the Prime Minister is all of the negative stuff day after day. The ads are out there that the Prime Minister's written, and you know the sledge-a-thon is on by the Prime Minister because he doesn't have a good story to tell about his 3 years in government. If the Prime Minister had done really good things for our country, if people were better today than they were 3 years ago, he'd be talking about that plan, but of course he's not. The trouble is that the Prime Minister has done a lot of damage to our country. He's hurt a lot of people, and a lot of people are really under the pump financially at the moment. And it's going to get worse if he's re-elected. So you can expect the personal sledges. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in our positive plan to help Australians deal with the cost of living crisis that Labor's created, to help deal with the housing crisis, and to make sure that we're a safer community and a safer country, and of course to make sure that we've got a quality healthcare system, and that's the plan that we've got. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, his opening pitch for the election campaign. Are you better off than you were 3 years ago? Unsurprisingly, this has been the focus for the coalition for some time, and it is the focus at the outset of this campaign. A reminder, he says, that Australians have gone backwards over the last few years, again accusing the Prime Minister of being distracted by the voice referendum in the first part of his term rather than inflation. Listed off various price increases over the course of the last few years. A lot of questions on the energy front and the gas plan that he announced last night. Reporters seeking some clarity on exactly how that would work and how nuclear is going to fit into the mix. And so Peter Dutton did have to spend a fair bit of time on that. But defence, security, also touchstones for the opposition leader there. Let's get some thoughts from Jane Norman and Jacob Grieber on how Peter Dutton went there. Jane, what did you think?
Well, I think it was pretty good sort of start from him. It's not usually as kind of sharp and punchy as he has been. I don't know if that's also just because it's been a very, very long week in Canberra. But look, what's notable is his kind of contrast here. He's trying to say that we had a Labor government that was distracted by issues like the voice. He is presenting an alternative that is achievable, it's practical. It's kind of like meat and potato stuff, you know. Go back to the old days where you could trust the coalition with the economy. That really is kind of like central to his pitch, and he's putting his energy policy at the centre of that, saying without a power system, without energy, we do not have an economy. And so then from there, he's trying to basically explain the reasons for his gas reservation policy, to try and get more gas into the system, to help manufacturing, to help bring power prices down. What we didn't see there was much detail about precisely how he'll do that beyond a kind of big picture gas strategy and a gas reservation policy for the East Coast.
Yeah, and look, he obviously is selling it. He used as many words that the energy policy is an economic policy. The energy is the economy. Our energy plan is a big economic reform. And there's no doubt, Jacob, nuclear is a big, bold idea to put forward an election, a risky idea to put forward an election. But nuclear is going to take some time. To get us there, gas is the answer. But he is being asked to explain how this will work.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail. You could see him sort of working his way through detail, and after a while, frankly, it sounded like, you know, it's a feeling you get when you've had put too much muesli in your bowl. You know, you're sort of chowing your way through it all.
All right.
It's not easy to sort of chomp into like something from a fast food shop.
But there's the old political saying, isn't there? When you're explaining, you're losing.
You're losing, yeah. I thought he was better when he started off saying, "Are you better off today than you were 3 years ago?" That's the crux of what he's really trying to talk about.
It worked for Trump.
It works for Trump. It worked, frankly, for or against incumbents all over the world the last few years, especially last year. The number of governments that crumbled under that pressure was enormous. Canada might be a different one, but we can talk about that. That's a whole other thing, but it's interesting, isn't it? Yep. So, are you better off today? Does that line work now? Because the government's sort of saying, well, we're doing all these things to make you better off in these difficult times.
And we've got a rate cut.
And we've got a rate cut, and Dutton's saying, well, those things they're all flippity-gibbet things, and they don't really change people's lives. I'm going to change your life.
And people are still really struggling.
And gas is part of my plan to do that.
He got a question, I just want to touch on this, about the response from the gas industry.
Very interesting.
And he hit that one out of the park, didn't he?
Well, it seemed like an own goal from the gas industry lobby group there, saying, well, shock and horror, if you do this, this will lead to oversupply in the market. It's actually not what the gas companies have been telling me overnight. But, Dutton just grabbed it. He went, good, well, that's what we want.
That's the objective.
Too much gas.
I mean, I think that, like, at the heart of all of this, it is a really complex policy, but Australia is a massive, we have huge gas reserves, but 70% of what we extract, we export. And so what Dutton is saying here might actually be politically popular. How about more Australian gas for Australians? Why are we only getting 30% of what we actually suck out of the ground? And the kind of absurd situation that we're in, and this is not because of the past 3 years, it's like the past 20 years of our energy policy, is that in a couple of years' time, we are heading towards a gas shortage, particularly in these southeastern states where we are, where we kind of need heating during winter, like Victoria. We're going to start importing gas. Twiggy Forrest is... It's crazy. Twiggy Forrest is building a gas import terminal in Port Kembla. There's another Viva Energy proposal in Victoria. Now, some of that gas actually might be coming from Western Australia, but Andrew Forrest himself has said, well, we might get it from Qatar, America, wherever we can get cheap gas from. And so I think, there's a lot to explain from the Coalition's policy, but at the heart of it is the fact that as a massive gas exporter, Australia is on the brink of becoming an importer. And that is a totally crazy situation.
I think you're bang on, and people be scratching their heads going, hang on, what? We're going to import gas to Australia, bring ships into, a terminal to import gas. Doesn't seem to make sense, and that's what he's tapping into, pardon the pun.